This is Brian, screenfiles.com and review. And what I'm looking at today is 2022's The Pale Blue Eye, directed by Scott Cooper. Scott Cooper was the director of Antlers, which was executive produced by Guillermo del Toro. And Antlers really impressed me, not only because it was about the Wendigo from Native American legend. It was at times seemingly underlit, but that's not true, in the sense that while you might think of it as being underlit, what was done was that it was lit in such a way as to enhance a certain feel, a certain atmosphere. And I know this is a Scott Cooper tendency as opposed to a cinematographer tendency, because cinematographer for Antlers is not the same person who was the cinematographer for The Pale Blue Eye, yet the tendency still is there, which strongly implies to me that it's something that the director wanted to happen and the cinematographer carried out his wishes. And so I think of him as a very interesting director. Though what bothers me about The Pale Blue Eye is not his direction, because it's very well done. It's the feel that this movie is very self-indulgent. And by self-indulgent, in this instance, I mean there's a preciousness to it. It runs 2 hours long. Now, I have nothing against that in principle, though my issue is that it didn't feel to me like it needed to be 2 hours long. And in fact, I think it would have been a much more penetrating and powerful movie at like an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes. It did not need to be 2 hours. And that really bugs me. It felt as if Scott Cooper couldn't bring himself to cut it. Now, I could be very wrong in that. There could be a 3-hour, 4-hour cut of The Pale Blue Eye somewhere. I have no idea. But this movie feels like he just couldn't let go of anything. And it's to the detriment of the movie. That being said, the story is pretty interesting. The movie revolves around Augustus Lander, played by Christian Bale, who is tasked with investigating a murder at a military academy. And at that military academy is a student named E.A. Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. And he's played by Harry Melling. And he looks like I would imagine a young Edgar Allan Poe would look. Now, keep in mind, I've never seen pictures of Edgar Allan Poe when he was young. I have seen pictures of him when he's in his, I believe it's late 30s. And Melling is a dead ringer. The casting is so good. And what's particularly interesting is that this is a detective thriller. And Edgar Allan Poe is believed to have written the first detective thriller, Murders in a Rue Morgue. And the movie seems to be implying strongly that this movie, well, this event in his life, which I don't believe is real, but then again, I don't know a lot about the history of Edgar Allan Poe, was the catalyst for that story. Strong implication there, and that's really interesting. And the title of the movie, The Pale Blue Eye, I believe is based upon The Telltale Heart. It's a fascinating concept, and it's really interesting. Though, as I said, part of what does the movie no favors is its length. It just doesn't need to be that long. And I mentioned the cinematography of Scott Cooper's movies. And this movie is so monotone. And it's not in black and white, by the way. It is in color. But the color palette is so muted, it's almost as if it were black and white. And it saps the life out of the movie. I don't understand, and Scott Cooper is not the only filmmaker to have done this, by the way. Others do it as well, and it confuses me. I don't quite understand why directors will take a very moody type of circumstance and reflect that with what you see on camera. It's just odd to me. I don't understand why you can't have bright colors. I don't understand why the story, which takes place during the winter, can't be beautiful. It's just an odd thing. As I said, Scott Cooper's not the only director who does this. I should say that Scott Cooper is not the only director to have done that type of shooting. But it's just irritating to me because the darkness of the story doesn't come from without, it comes from within. And so I would like to see a director use that as opposed to turning your film into a very morose and dour affair outside of the people who it revolves around. Make it like life, which is to say, you have beauty, you have terror, which the movie embodies quite a bit, by the way. It's not monotone. Life is a lot of things. Monotone is not one of them. So it's just distracting. And that rather limited visual palette, combined with the length, saps the life from this movie. It's got great performances. Christian Bale, great performance. Gillian Anderson, great performance. I want to say Toby Kebbell, but that's not the Toby I mean. But he did a great performance. And Harry Melling, great performances all. But the movie is so lifeless. It's rather inert in its own way. And that's a pity because it's just so well done other than that inertness. And as I already mentioned, that inertness is deliberate. It's not an accident. And I get the feeling that the fact that we're dealing with Edgar Allan Poe as a young man, but Edgar Allan Poe nonetheless, had a lot to do with the tone of the movie. Now keep in mind, The Pale Blue Eye is based upon a book, which I haven't read. So there may be more going on than I know of, but I can only speak to what actually is on the screen. And it's just a dour, murky affair. It needed life, which is ironic because it's revolving around a lot of violence. But that's what makes the violence powerful. It's life. And The Pale Blue Eye, unfortunately, has very little of it. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or follow. Peace. Have a great